All right, thank you all for your patience. I will now call this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. Will the Secretary please take the roll?
Senator Flores,
Present.
Senator Orenshaw,
Here.
Senator Lang, Senator Nguyen, Senator Hansen, Senator Krasner, Senator Ellison, Chair Scheibel.
Here, thank you so much. We have everybody present today, which means we have more than a quorum. Welcome all to the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have one bill hearing today, and we also have some other business on our agenda. I'm going to take them out of order, pretty much as out of order as possible. We have a BDR to introduce this afternoon. This is BDR 43-900. All the members of the committee do have a copy of it on their desks. This BDR relates to traffic offenses, and it hopefully will improve the process for contesting civil citations and for handling both civil and criminal citations in our courts here in Nevada. So I'll start off with any questions about the BDR. I'm not hearing any questions, so at this time I would accept a motion to introduce BDR 43-900.
So moved, Madam Chair. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Vice Chair Flores. We have a second from Senator Orenshaw. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, as a reminder, this is just a motion to introduce the BDR. Doesn't indicate your support or lack thereof for the measure itself, just that we will have this introduced as a bill to have a hearing like we do with all of our bills that become laws, and we'll give it due consideration. So with that, all in favor of introducing this BDR 43-900 say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, by unanimous vote, we will be introducing BDR 43-900. With that done, I am still going to keep going out of order, and we're going to do our work session first today. I'm going to go through them one by one because I don't think we have, I think there are some questions on them or statements that some members wanted to make. So we'll start with SB 4. I will turn it over to Mr. McDonald to walk through the work session document.
Thank you. Jared McDonald, Research Division, Legislative Council Bureau. The first bill on your work session is Senate Bill 4. This bill revises provisions related to consent to adoption. It was sponsored by this committee on behalf of the Division of Child and Family Services and heard on February 12th. The bill adds caseworkers who are employed by an authorized agency to the list of witnesses who may attest to the consent to a specific child adoption, and there are no amendments proposed for this bill. Thank you, Chair.
All right, any questions about Senate Bill 4? I would accept a motion to do pass. We have a motion from Senator Nguyen.
Second.
We have a second, I think, from Senator Lang. All in favor of a do pass vote on Senate Bill 4, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. We will unanimously decide to do pass Senate Bill 4. That takes us to Senate Bill 13. Oh, thank you. I need to assign the floor statement. Any volunteers? All right, Senator Orenshaw, it's yours. And now we will go to SB 13. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Jared McDonald, Research Division. Senate Bill 13 revises provisions related to exoneration of bail. This bill was sponsored by this committee on behalf of the Nevada Supreme Court and heard on February 25th. The bill requires the court to exonerate bail if the defendant admitted to bail and the prosecuting attorney stipulate to the exoneration of bail. And as was discussed in the hearing, there was an amendment proposed by John McCormick, and the amendment proposes to amend the bill to allow for an alternate disposition of bail if both parties, the defense and prosecution, agree. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions on Senate Bill 13? Senator Ellison. I would accept a motion to amend and do pass. We have a motion from Senator Nguyen.
Second.
We have a second from Senator Orenshaw. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Again, we have unanimously voted to amend and do pass Senate Bill 13. Any volunteers for the floor statement? All right, Senator Wynn, this one's yours. And that takes us to Senate Bill 88.
Senate Bill 88 revises provisions related to offenders. This was sponsored on behalf of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on the Judiciary and heard on February 26. The bill requires the Director of the Department of Corrections to discharge any outstanding medical debt owed by an offender to the department upon the release of the offender from prison. We do have one amendment proposed by the Chair, and it will amend the bill to make the requirement proposed in subsection 4L of Section 1 to discharge any outstanding medical debt owned by the offender to the department retroactive to all previously released offenders. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on SB 88? Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Does this absolve private providers who are outside of the prison system from either being charged for that, or does it absolve them from being able to collect the debt still? This is strictly for inside the prison, right?
So this would generally apply to instances in which the person who's incarcerated is taken outside of the prison to receive medical care that they can't provide in the prison. Presently, the state is paying that cost to the medical provider and then trying to recoup the cost from the person who is incarcerated. This would maintain the first two steps. They would still have to pay, they would still be taking people outside of the prison for medical care. The state would still be paying the provider for the care. We would just not do that third step where the state tries to get reimbursed by the person who is incarcerated. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's what I want to make sure that what this is and isn't doing. So yes, that's the answer I was looking for. The other question is, I know we're not a fiscal committee. I talked to the prison folks. They said this involves millions of dollars in potential cost to the state. What is the fiscal note on this thing?
Thank you for that question, because I'm a little bit surprised by that. I thought we heard in our presentation that even though there are, millions of dollars owed, we've collected something in the range of $6,000 per year. So I would expect that the cost would be closer to $6,000 a year, because that would be the revenue we're missing out on.
Well, that's why I just want to double check, because that didn't totally jive with what I had heard as well. But so,
And
I want to make sure if this thing passes that we're not passing substantial debt onto either the prison system itself or ultimately the taxpayers. If it's minimal, got it.
And I think we do have somebody in the room who can answer that question, so I'm going to invite you. Thank you so much for for being here and for being willing to get in the hot seat for a second.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator for the Nevada Department of Corrections. Short answer, yes, it's about $6,000 that we actually collect. And that is what was addressed in the amendment, is to make that go away. So to your first question, you are correct. The Department of Corrections does pay in full for treatments and services to our community providers when an offender goes to them for treatment. This piece is just, it absolves them when they're released or paroled from us saying, you owe us back for that.
And in a normal year, it's only $6,000 that you would basically.
Correct.
So in a normal year, you only collect $6,000 anyway, out of millions and millions of dollars paid to get people better in the prison system?
For the record, Russ Alfano, that is correct. That's about all we've earned. I believe that was the average of a 3 or 5 year average. It was about $6,600.
Much less than I anticipated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Any other, Senator Krasner, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for agreeing to answer questions. I appreciate it. So when an inmate needs to go to, let's say there's a prison fight and they're harmed or damaged or whatever, they break their fist punching someone, then they need to go to an outside healthcare provider. How do we ensure that those outpatient or out-prison healthcare providers get payment for the services that they rendered?
Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Thank you, Senator Krasner, for the question. May I go direct, ma'am?
Please do.
Okay. That is a different circumstance. That's covered under NRS 209-246-1 subsection B when you're dealing with altercations or fights or self-harm or even sports-related injuries. But we are contracted, the Department of Corrections, we contract with preferred provider networks to access their network of community providers. And so anything that is a treatment beyond the scope of the general practitioners that we employ, we go out through them, and then through a third-party administrator, they submit billing, and then we pay on a weekly, we call it a check run, where they submit all the claims from the previous week, are adjudicated and adjusted based on the network rates that were agreed upon through the PPO network, and then we pay those rates through the third-party administrator. Checks are issued and such. It's contracted.
Thank you, Chair. So the bill specifically deals with medical debt of inmates. Where do they get that debt then? Where does that medical debt come from if you're saying all the outside providers are paid for and all the in-care health care is provided? So why is there any medical debt at all? What are we talking about here? Where does that come from, please?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Under provisions of NRS 209-246-1B, if an offender has costs incurred as a result of self-harm or harming another, or a sports-related injury, the prison medical pays the bill on behalf of the offender's treatment, and then that bill is submitted to the inmate welfare account to make the prison medical whole. And then the inmate welfare account would then ascribe that debt to the particular offenders. If they're found guilty, for lack of a better term, under their disciplinary report or whatever. Cellmate A punches cellmate B. Offender, cellmate A is the, attacker, so he is responsible for cellmate B's repairing of his broken jaw or something as such. So that's where the debt comes from. What this bill is referencing is when that offender that has accrued this debt is paroled or commutes their sentence, we let them know that, by the way, you owe X amount of dollars. Inmate welfare will notify them 30 days after release. Follow that up with a 60-day. And the success we've had in being reimbursed for anything is amassing, I think, $6,600 a year. And the cost for us to do the processing of the tracking and mailing and the stationery and keeping and following up on this costs us about $4,000 to $4,500 per year to net an income of $6,600 a year. So that is we are fine with as amended. You know what, let's just not do this piece. So as Senator Scheibel said, we'll do step one, we'll take care of them, make sure their treatment, and if it's beyond our scope of work and practice, we'll send them to an outside specialist. We will pay, the Department of Corrections pays on their behalf, and we just won't chase them down the road. They have other things to worry about upon release and reintegration back into society than to trying to pay us $300 a month.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for that recap and for those explanations. With that, I think we are ready to accept a motion to amend, or I am ready to accept a motion to amend and do pass.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Orenshaw. We have a second from Senator Nguyen. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, it looks like Senators Hansen, Ellison, and Krasner are nays. I do want to reserve my right. I heard some stuff today that I didn't know. Okay, and it looks like I appreciate Senator Hansen and Senator Ellison are reserving their right to change their vote. which of course you always do have that right, whether you reserve it or not, but I appreciate you letting us know that you are still giving the bill consideration. The motion does pass to amend and do pass SB 88, and I will take the floor statement on this one. That brings us to SB 140.
Thank you, Chair. The final bill on your work session today is Senate Bill 140. This bill revises provisions governing certain programs of treatment established by the juvenile court. This was sponsored by Senator Orenshaw and heard on February 18th. The bill expands the authority of juvenile courts to establish a program for the treatment of children diagnosed or suspected of having neurobehavioral disorders associated with prenatal exposure to alcohol or a controlled substance. And we have no amendments on this bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions on SB 140? Senator Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleague did a great job introducing this bill, and I talked to him prior to this. And one of the cases that I had a problem with was rape during the trial. The judge will determine if that will go up to district court. Is that correct? And only the judge can make that decision if he's still tried as a juvenile or goes up. Was that the other one?
That's a different bill.
Okay, I thought it was this one. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry today. I apologize, and I'm glad you did help me with that bill this morning. I want to get that on the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, through you to Senator Ellison. Senate Bill
Go
140, if
direct.
it passed, would still leave the discretion as to whether this kind of therapeutic diversion court would be established. Currently, we have a therapeutic diversion court in Las Vegas called Day Court, Detention Alternatives for Autistic Youth. You heard from Judge Bailey, who runs the day court down in southern Nevada, and that tries to identify children right now who might be on the autism spectrum and who've oftentimes never gotten any treatment, and tries to divert them and get them that treatment. This would expand it to other neurobehavioral disorders, such as kids who've been exposed to alcohol or other drugs before they were born. So I urge its support. I think that they've had a tremendous success rate with this program, and I hope the committee would support it. I'm happy to answer any other questions, Chair.
Any other questions? All right, looks like we are ready to move to a motion to do pass SB 140. We have
So
a
moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Wynn. We have a second from Senator Flores. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. By unanimous vote, I think I forgot to actually say aye out loud, but I'm also in favor of do passing this bill. So by unanimous vote, SB 140 is passed, and that brings us to the conclusion of our work session, I think. Oh, the floor statement. We'll go to Senator Orenshaw, of course. Okay, sorry, we were just getting ourselves organized over here. All right, and now it is time to go into our bill hearing on SB 323. I'll be handing the gavel over to my fantastic Vice Chair, Senator Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 323. Whenever you are ready, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon again, everybody. My name is still Melanie Scheibel. I am the state senator for District 9 in Southwest Las Vegas. I am here to help present SB 323, and I am just thrilled to be joined by one of my favorite people. His face may be familiar to you. This is Max Greenstein. He was a member of the Youth Legislature in the last session, and he presented you all who are on this committee with an amazing bill to continue to foster relationships between people who are in custody and their families, particularly mothers and their children. And Mr. Greenstein, since completing his term at the Youth Legislature, has also graduated from high school, and he is now a student at Yale University. I didn't think he could get any smarter or any more polished, but he has. He remains incredibly committed to the people of Nevada. He remains incredibly bright and sharp, and working with him on this bill, SB 323, has been an absolute joy. And SB 323 builds on the work that we did last session to foster those relationships between people in custody and their families, to continue that into the future. And I am very happy to turn over the presentation to Mr. Greenstein.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Scheibel, for the introduction, and thank you, members of the committee, for your time this afternoon. My name is Max Greenstein, M-A-X-G-R-I-N-S-T-E-I-N for the record. I'm a former Nevada youth legislator representing Senate District 15 and a recent graduate of the Davidson Academy in Reno. Currently, though, I'm stuck in the middle of my college semester here in Connecticut, hence why I unfortunately could not be there in Carson City to testify today in person. Now, 2 years ago, I sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee and presented Senate Bill 234. Senator Scheibel and I drafted Senate Bill 234 to create a pilot program to provide free, daily, 15-minute phone calls to prisoners at Florence McClure Correctional Center, Nevada's women's prison, so that they could stay in touch with their families. While SB 234 passed unanimously and was signed into law by Governor Lombardo, the pilot program that it created has since run its course. And so I'm back this session with a simple ask for the legislature to extend a program that has kept hundreds of Nevada families together over the past 2 years. Now, I could sit here and rattle off statistics about the thousands of free phone calls that have been placed through the Florence McClure pilot program. But more persuasive than that are the voices of those who have been helped by SB 234. In fact, we've received a number of letters from women who've been able to foster renewed relationships with their children because of the program. I want to share excerpts from the 2 letters that have been the most meaningful to me. One woman at Florence McClure wrote that when she first called her 3-year-old daughter after the pilot program was enacted, she asked her daughter if she knew who she was talking to. Her daughter's response was a no. Her daughter lit up when learning that she was speaking to her incarcerated mother, exclaiming over the phone, "Wait, you're my mom?" Now, because of the free phone calls provided by the pilot program, this woman writes that she's been able to have, quote, consistent daily communication with my 3-year-old daughter so that she can get to know her mommy even though I'm unable to be there. Another woman incarcerated at Florence McClure wrote to us in the summer of 2023, shortly after Governor Lombardo signed SB 234 into law. "I feel lost and alone without my family," she wrote. "My small tribe is the pulse in my heart, but it's a faint pulse since I can't even contact them. My family, who are financially crippled, can't afford phone time," she continued. "However, in the past 3 days, I've been able to talk to them every day." Her letter ended with one final ask. "Please turn this pilot program into a permanent practice. Please and thank you, and God bless." And so, echoing that woman's words, I, along with Senator Scheibel and the rest of SB 323's sponsors and co-sponsors, would like to ask the committee to not let a program that has benefited so many Nevada families die. Now, SB 234 originally created a pilot program to test whether a program like this would be beneficial for prisons and for Nevada's incarcerated population. So, along with creating the pilot program, the bill instructed the Department of Corrections to issue a report evaluating its successes. The department did so in February 2024, and the conclusions of the report were, to say the least, heartening. According to the Department of Corrections, 394 free calls were placed in total at Florence McClure between July 2023 and January 2024. The total number of calls, both free and billable, during the pilot period increased communication with family members and friends by 23%. And perhaps most importantly, the report found that the population in general felt happier, less stressed, and had a greater sense of well-being. Quote, having daily interaction with loved ones, the report prepared by the Nevada Department of Corrections goes on to state, improved daily functioning, quality of life, and stability for everyone at Florence McClure. Now, with that background in mind, Senate Bill 323 aims to do two main things. First, given the success of the two-year pilot program established pursuant to Senate Bill 234, Senate Bill 323 makes it permanent. Incarcerated women at Florence McClure Correctional Center will continue to receive free, daily 15-minute phone calls, allowing them to continue to keep in touch with their children who themselves have done nothing wrong. Second, it codifies recent Federal Communications Commission rules that eliminate an undue tax burden on Nevada families by prohibiting the Department of Corrections from making revenue on prison phone calls. This ensures that children with loved ones at Florence McClure and other Nevada prisons can affordably maintain relationships with their parents even outside the scope of a short, free 15-minute call. And so finally, with that overview in mind, let me conclude by answering the most fundamental question: why should you support Senate Bill 323? And I'll provide the same answer that I gave 2 years ago when advocating for Senate Bill 234, that it's about families. I think it's fitting that this bill was scheduled for a hearing during Children's Week at the legislature because, at the end of the day, this bill is about kids. It's about strengthening family bonds and showing that even if a family is separated by prison walls, the strongest bond in the world is still between parents and their children. That woman's daughter might not at first recognize her incarcerated mother's voice, but her face did light up when she realized that her mother was on the other side of the line, and that feeling of love stays with her, even though her mother can't be with her 24/7. The success of Senate Bill 234 demonstrates the enormous amount of good that can come from fostering and promoting bonds between parents and their children. SB 323 ensures that incarcerated Nevada mothers can continue to have an affordable and accessible tool to do so. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
And thank you both for that wonderful presentation. Members, at this time, we'll open it up for questions. We'll start with Senator Nguyen, please, and then we'll move over to Senator Krasner.
Thank you for this presentation. It's always great to see. It is true. Senator Scheibel was correct. You've gotten even better than you were previously. So thank you for presenting this. Do you have any information, and maybe this would be best answered by NDOC, on how the programs like this that allow this communication between family members and those that are incarcerated has actually helped with, I guess, the general attitude and behavior of the people that are incarcerated, and how that might lead to safer work environments for correction officers within the facility?
Thank you very much, Senator Nguyen, for the question. Through Vice Chair Flores, Max Greenstein for the record.
And please do feel free to go direct, please. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I don't have firm statistics. I think that would be best suited for the Department of Corrections. But what the report that I've submitted for the committee's review as an exhibit does say is that there was a tangible impact on mental health, behavior, and daily functioning, which I assume does sort of segue into the different sort of areas that you're referencing.
May I follow up, Vice Chair?
Please follow up.
Do you have any data just like around the country and places that have implemented programs like this on the cost savings that there are for like mental health services, behavioral issues within correctional facilities when you increase the amount of time that people can communicate with loved ones?
Max Greenstein for the record. So this is a really important point when considering this bill, and so I appreciate that you're bringing it up. I think that while there is sort of a tangible immediate cost to the prison system in providing free calls, really what we're doing here is providing a cost saving in the future. Now, daily consistent communication with parents is one of the sort of most salient factors in determining if a justice-impacted child will end up one day in the prison system. And there's also research that suggests that communication with children impacts how likely it is that an offender themselves will reoffend after they've been released from prison. And I've submitted for the committee's review a number of surveys and studies as exhibits that sort of prove that point.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Senator Krasner, followed by Senator Ornshaw, followed by Senator Ellison.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for your presentation. So just a couple questions. In your presentation, you said Florence McClure and other prisons. Is there an amendment coming that includes other prisons?
Max Greenstein for the record. So immediately, no, there's not an amendment coming. The first portion of the bill extends the pilot program that was established by Senate Bill 234, and that only applies to Florence McClure Correctional Center for two main reasons. First of all, because originally 2 years ago when we were going to communicate with the Department of Corrections, they let us know that the phone call infrastructure at other prisons didn't exist to allow for an increased volume of calls that would be brought about by a free phone call pilot program. So for that reason, we've kept it to Florence McClure Correctional Center. We're also keeping it there for sort of a cost reason because we think it makes sense to sort of reduce the scope of the fiscal impact the bill would have by reducing it for now to one prison. So for the second part of your question, I've referenced other prisons because the bill does two things. It also codifies FCC rules that require the Department of Corrections does not extract revenue by charging an increased price for prison phone calls. And so that applies, like I said, to the entire offender population, regardless if they're in Florence McClure or not.
Follow, please.
Thank you. And then you keep mentioning that it's just between the women in Florence McClure and their children, but in the bill it says any family member. So it's not just children, right? It could be a husband, an uncle, a dad, a grandpa, boyfriend, girlfriend. Is that right?
Max Greenstein for the record, that is right. I'll leave sort of the practical implementation questions for the department to answer, but we found that this bill has been most beneficial because it's helped to foster those relationships between incarcerated mothers at Florence McClure and their children. But the Department of Corrections in its reports also references an instance where a woman was able to get in touch with her elderly husband. He's in his 70s. He had, I think, Alzheimer's. And so in that case, I think it's beneficial to foster sort of other relationships between sort of family members and their sort of incarcerated loved ones in prison.
So just to clarify, it's not just their children, it's all family members, correct?
Max Greenstein for the record, that is correct. What
Thank
we're doing is
you.
providing a 15-minute phone call that they can do with as they please.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Mr. Greenstein, for presenting the bill and all your hard work on it. A couple of questions I have with the Vice Chair's indulgence. Do you know how many female inmates participated in the pilot program in terms of trying to stay in touch with their family? I talk to many constituents who don't have reliable transportation, so even getting to Florence McClure, up kind of near Nellis Air Force Base is a challenge if you don't have reliable transportation. And I wonder if you think this will help bridge that gap, in terms of someone who's incarcerated at Florence McClure being able to stay in touch with her children, her family, and keep that bond going, even if maybe her relatives don't have reliable transportation to do an in-person visit. And then my last question, with your indulgence, Vice Chair, sorry for the compound question, is do you think this might ever be expanded to video visits where, mom might be able to see her son or daughter, and then they could see her in the future? And if that's not appropriate for you, maybe I can ask the NDOC officials about that. Thank you.
So thank you, Senator Orenshaw, for the question. Max Greenstein for the record. So for the first part of your question about the number of people who've benefited, the report from the Department of Corrections, which I've submitted as an exhibit for the committee, doesn't have a number for the number of people who've placed free phone calls, but it does state that during the first 6 months of the pilot program, the average number of offenders housed at FMWCC was about 691, a little less than 700. And I do know that 93,394 free phone calls were completed during that duration of the pilot program that the report is studying. And I think you do raise a really important point that is sort of critical in emphasizing that for a lot of families, the cost of staying in touch with their incarcerated loved ones, be it by traveling to a prison or by sort of staying in touch over the phone, is really prohibitive, especially in a large state like Nevada, where if you live in Reno, it might not be economically feasible to drive or to fly all the way down to Las Vegas to go visit your loved one at FMWCC. And that's sort of one issue that this bill is seeking to rectify. For your second part of your question about whether this program might ever be expanded to video calls, so the bill text for SB 323 does state that the bill would apply also to video calls should they eventually be introduced. It's my understanding from the Department of Corrections that there is a plan to introduce tablets which would have a video call capability to prisons across the state because of a bill that the legislature passed in the last session. I don't believe that those tablets are in place yet, but I'll leave sort of that more specific technical question to the Department of Corrections to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greenstein. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll go to Senator Ellison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I got a couple. I'm hoping that maybe we'll get the state to come in and give us a physical note about what this is. But I had an employee that worked for me, and once a month I'd go in, try to go through the bills, and I kept seeing these high numbers of costs that were back to that company. And so I got a hold of Frontier at the time and said, why these high costs in this? Come to find out, there was an employee that works for me. Her son was called from the jail 2 or 3 times a day. Then when he went to prison, then he was doing this same thing when we finally caught it and put a block on it. But she asked to come back and pay for the debts. But the problem is that is massive expensive. I couldn't believe how much it was for these collect calls coming from the jail and from the state prison back to my business phone. So she was calling yes, and then nobody's there but her, and she's accepting the calls, and it was pretty expensive. So I don't know, by the time I got through everything and went back, I mean, we're probably talking a couple $1,000s for 3 or 4 months. So there's a problem with the cost that's coming from the prisons and from the jail.
Thank you, Senator Ellison, for the question. Max Greenstein for the record. I think I'll answer the question about cost in 2 ways. First, like I said before, I really see Senate Bill 323 as a long-term cost saving for the state, referencing the same research that I did before about how talking to family members consistently keeps children out of prison in the future, and it keeps people in prison from returning to prison after they've been released. But the second way that I'll sort of tackle the funding question is by emphasizing that this isn't a new expenditure for the state. So Senate Bill 234, which we had passed previously in the last session, was signed into law, didn't have a fiscal note because at that time it was being funded by the Inmate Store Fund, which is revenue from commissary purchases. That feeds into something called the Inmate Welfare Fund. At the time in the last session, there was a $14 million surplus in the Inmate Welfare Fund. And so Senate Bill 234 didn't have a fiscal note because we were able to fund it with sort of a pre-existing pot of money. That pot of money, unfortunately, no longer exists in this session. So we do anticipate there being a fiscal note. But sort of like I said, that's not a new expenditure for the state. That's an existing sum of money that we're already spending, albeit from a different pot of money, but that I think is really worthwhile in the long term.
And this is Senator Scheibel chiming in as well. I'm not sure when this happened with the excessive calls to your business phone, but I do think there has been a shift in the way that the Department of Corrections views phone calls and approaches phone calls. They used to be a big moneymaker for facilities, correctional facilities, and so it used to be that the prison would pay, 6 cents a minute for a call, but then turn around and charge the offender $1 per minute for the call. And our department has worked really hard to reduce those costs, and that's kind of what the second section of the bill does, is it says that the prison can no longer use phone calls as a money-making mechanism. So what you saw on that bill was likely reflective of how much money the Department of Corrections was making off of families, frankly, who were putting money on that person's books, or in that case, who were accepting the collect calls. Normally be the family members who paid the bill, hopefully not their employer, but we're trying to not put people in that situation where having contact with their son or daughter costs them thousands of dollars a month. It should be free to do 15 minutes a day, and if they want and can afford to talk to them more often, that should be capped at 6 cents a minute or somewhere around there, and it shouldn't be thousands of dollars for people to stay in touch.
And follow up.
Please follow up.
And I like the deal about the commissary that, they pay into it, and that's a great idea, and I don't know why it went away. But the other question is, and thank my colleague here, SB 3323 was the fiscal note is 0 on here.
It may be that the department...
Thank you for the...
Please go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Senator Ellison. Max Greenstein for the record. It's my understanding that there was going to be a fiscal note. I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised that it's 0 right now, but I'll leave those questions for Senator Scheibel or for the departments.
Yeah, let's go with a 0 fiscal note and vote on it now before they can come up here and say anything.
Button, there we go. Members, any additional questions? I'll take a personal point of privilege and say thank you for this, and I hope in the future we can expand this. I know it's an access to justice. Oftentimes, I know there's individuals who will call their family and share information, and it's the family who kind of takes the lead on trying to hire attorneys, try to find resources, wraparound services, etc., and allowing them to have constant daily communication makes it cheaper, because oftentimes attorneys will charge for these consults, right? And sometimes it's mom or sister or brother or boyfriend who gets a quick 5-minute phone call with an attorney to see if they can potentially take the case. So there's just so many different avenues that this conversation is important. So I appreciate you doing it. It was a comment, not a question. Madam Chair, if I could invite you to sit back. And at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 323 to please come forward. And I do not have access to the video in Las Vegas. If there is anybody in Las Vegas, please step forward. And I do see one individual in Las Vegas. If we can start in Las Vegas, and then we'll move back down to Carson City. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kimberly Renee. I strongly urge you to support this bill. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Welcome. We'll stay in Las Vegas.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Greetings, committee. My name is Jagada Chambers, Jagada Chambers. You always come with your little prepared statements, but Senator Ellison really pierced me during my incarceration. I went from spring break to incarceration in Florida, and my parents, they had me calling twice on Monday and twice on Thursday. Naive from college to prison, I just continued to call. Those calls were $38 back then. It was a little over $2 and some cents a minute. And I was just trying to be strong for my parents. Um, but the reality of those calls, they were very, very important to my family. The last time I spoke to both of my parents was on a prison phone call. So this is very sacred space for me. And the youngster that is presenting the bill, you're just fabulous. Definitely an inspiration. And I'm gonna make sure my son watches this particular hearing. Just want to salute you all for being attentive to the folks that are incarcerated and really trying to humanize them. I'll end with that. Thank you both.
Thank you for joining us, sir. I don't believe there's anybody else in in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support. We'll move to Carson City. Welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Nick Shepak, Nickshepak. It is always a pleasure and impossible to follow Mr. Greenstein on these hearings. I am very proud to have been able to work with him on this legislation as well as the legislation last session. This is a family values bill that has immense returns. Allowing people to stay in contact with their families while incarcerated is a key factor to successful reentry, and it benefits the family immediately. Whether that is a child or an adult parent or a nephew, anything is extremely helpful. I have talked many times to the director about this issue, and at a Board of Prison Commissioners meeting, he read letters that he received from the women at Florence McClure. I think it was possibly the first time he ever received fan mail from individuals inside the Nevada Department of Corrections, but those letters moved everyone in the audience to tears. This is an extremely important program. We need to continue it, and we ask for your support.
Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Flores and committee members. My name is Denise Heredia, Heredia. I'm the Associate Director of Return Strong, and we support SB 323 because family connection is essential for successful rehabilitation and reintegration. Half of incarcerated people in the United States are parents of minor children, yet for many, a single phone call is their only link to a loved one. Often, these children that are left behind when one parent goes to prison are cared for by grandparents or other family members, not necessarily another parent. And moreover, no matter the form a family takes, maintaining these bonds is critical for emotional well-being and rehabilitation. This bill is a crucial step towards a correctional system that values people over profit. No one should have to choose between a vital family connection and financial stability. We urge you to pass SB 323, and we thank Max and the bill sponsors and co-sponsors for championing this cause. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Tia Smith, Tia-Smith. I'm a policy attorney with ACLU of Nevada. We strongly support this bill, and we urge the committee to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Harrison Epstein, Harrison Epstein. I'm a legal extern with the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We are excited to support SB 323 because, quite simply, it is good policy, allowing women incarcerated at Florence McClure to have free communication with their families, their children, their parents, their loved ones, for 15 minutes each day is an easy way to improve the lives of everybody involved. This is an important piece of the rehabilitative puzzle. It gives these women and their families hope, joy, and connection. Passing SB 323 also recognizes and celebrates this body's votes in 2023 with the pilot program. You heard it from Mr. Greenstein and all of the people affected. This program works, and it should be made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Angela Knott from the Washoe County Public Defender's Office, ANGELAKNOTT. It's a pleasure to be supporting a bill that will have a real impact on real people. Research shows that the majority of incarcerated women are mothers, the majority of which are single mothers. They often don't have the means to pay for a simple phone call. Being able to communicate with a child or loved one can literally be a lifeline for women who are incarcerated. The simple act of hearing your child's voice can make a world of difference with how a mother survives incarceration. Maintaining a support system while incarcerated is essential for an easier transition once an incarcerated mother has served her time. It also helps ease the negative impacts of incarceration on children, and it supports stronger families in general. Not being able to put a few dollars on an account to make a phone call can be a harmful barrier to a single mother choosing a better life path for herself and for her children. Let's remove that barrier. We urge the committee to support and pass SB 323. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anybody else wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 323? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone in support?
Thank you, Vice Chair. If you would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 323, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN, advocates for the inmates and the innocent. This is such, first of all, a thank you, Vice Chair, and to the presenter, Senator Scheibel and Mr. Greenstein, for bringing this forward. Love the presentation. This is such a wonderful bill to what would become a permanent solution that will allow the inmate and the child to continue to nurture and bond the bond that they have established. Family is so important to the inmates, and by keeping them connected, it is beneficial to their mental and physical well-being. We strongly support SB 323, and we echo the previous comments that have been made. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us. Next caller in support, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits ending in 963, please press star 6 to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Yesenia Moya, YESENIA MOYA. Please excuse me, I'm a little emotional. I'm a community organizer, educator, and artist. I'm here in strong support of SB 323. This is personal for me. This is a bill that affirms the dignity of incarcerated individuals and our families. As an organizer, my work is rooted in the values of justice, dignity, and collective care, principles that demand we recognize the humanity in every person. As someone who has spent thousands of dollars through Securious and other vendors, I can't begin to express the importance of hearing the voice of my loved one. I've also helped raise funds for countless families so that they too can connect with their families. This bill is not asking for much, just a simple call that can make a difference to their child, ailing parent, or life partner. Strong family connections provide emotional support, stability, and a sense of belonging. For children with incarcerated parents, regular communications are lifelines that help to mitigate trauma, maintain bonds, break cycles of injustice, and reduce feelings of abandonment. Families provide the love and encouragement that can be a guiding force for rehabilitation and reintegration. Prison phone systems have imposed undue financial burdens on our families, disproportionately impacting low-income communities, Black and Indigenous families, and communities of color. The ability to communicate with loved ones should never be a privilege reserved for those who can afford it. I reiterate that it is a lifeline for those inside. Maintaining these connections reduces recidivism and are critical for reentry. SB 323 is about more than just phone calls. It's about keeping families together, honoring human dignity, and challenging the unjust financial exploitation of incarcerated individuals and their loved ones. I urge you to support SB 323 and stand with families, community members, and advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moya. Next caller in support, please.
Hi, my name is Yvonne Everlund, and it's EFVERLUND, and I am here today in strong support of SB 323 because I know firsthand how vital family connections is for those who are incarcerated, as well as for those of us who wait each day to hear their voices. The financial burden of a simple phone call should not stand in the way of families staying connected. Imagine being a child who can only hear their parents' voice once a month because the cost is too high. This is heartbreaking reality for far too many families across Nevada. And this is devastating because these families deserve better. They deserve the chance to stay connected, to heal, and to support each other. SB 323 is a step towards recognizing what research has constantly proven. When incarcerated individuals maintain strong family ties, they are more likely to succeed upon release and less likely to return to prison. These phone calls aren't just a convenience, they are a lifeline. They are critical to rehabilitation, mental well-being, and ultimately breaking the destructive cycle of incarceration. A simple "I love you" or "I'm proud of you" can mean everything to someone in prison, offering the hope and strength they need to fight for a better future. I urge you to pass SB 323 because this bill isn't just about phone calls. It's about investing in people, families, and a system that values connections over isolation. Let's support families and let's support the hope for a better tomorrow. I also hope that this program can be implemented in all of the facilities across Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Do we have anyone else in support of Senate Bill 323 on the phone?
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brittany Kemp, BRITTANYKEMP, and I am here as a representative for myself, Make It Work Nevada, and in solidarity with mass liberation and strong support of SB 223. Staying connected to family and loved ones is essential for rehabilitation, emotional well-being, and successful reentry back home. Studies show that maintaining regular communication with support networks reduces recidivism and improves the outcomes for both incarcerated people and their families. High cost of prison phone calls create an unnecessary financial burden, disproportionately affecting low-income families. By passing SB 323, Nevada can show support for strong family connections, mental health, and overall well-being of our communities. I strongly urge the committee to support SB 323. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. BPS, do we have anybody else wishing to testify in support?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The public line is open and working. There are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite anybody wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 323 to please come forward, Carson City or Las Vegas. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone?
Thank you, Vice Chair. If you would like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 323, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Understood. Thank you. BPS, we'll stay on the phone. Anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position for Senate Bill 323?
Thank you, Vice Chair. If you would like to testify in neutral for Senate Bill 323, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, there are no further callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Lastly, anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas wishing to testify in the neutral position, please come forward. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, Madam Chair, any closing remarks? No? Well, thank you again for the presentation. At this time, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 323.
All right. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Flores, for running such an excellent hearing. That brings us to the last item on our agenda today, which is public comment. Anybody wishing to give public comment is invited down to the front here in Carson City or in Las Vegas to do so now. I don't see anybody coming forward for public comment in person, so we'll go to the phones, please, for public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, then, that brings us to the end of our meeting. We will be updating you all on the schedule for next week as we still have some moving pieces. We appreciate your patience with us, and for now, we are adjourned.